Hey everybody, welcome to Dojo Talks, and I'm quite excited, hopefully Jesse and Kostya also, that we're starting a new series here where we're going to rank all the World Championship matches throughout history. Super cool topic, and we've got a few shout outs to give before we get into the meat of this topic. And the first one is to my friend Andy Lee, who I've played the most tournament games against in my life. And he has a fantastic blog. I guess it's a Substack. I'm not sure what the difference is, in which he writes really, really excellent articles about chess. And recently, as sort of lead up to the Ding versus Gukesh match, he started publishing his rankings of the top world championship matches of the last 25 years or something like that. And I thought it was like super interesting. I'm loving reading his rankings, and it made me think we have to do our own rankings. And then I really like the episodes of Dojo Talks where we get into historical stuff and little stories come up that Kostya or Jesse have heard somewhere. And so I thought, yeah, let's go for the whole thing. So we're going to cover every match from the dawn of time till now that could be considered a world championship match or probably world championship match. We're going to rank them on this tier list of how great a match they were to us. We'll give you our criteria for that. And we, at the end, will also rank the top 5 matches overall from this whole historical survey. We're going to be talking about on the order of 60 matches here. And a couple other shout outs we wanted to make real quick. We wanted to give a shout out to chessgames.com. The site's got strengths and weaknesses, some issues with it, but we found like a super thing where it's got little blurbs on each world championship match with the games of the world championship match right below. You can quickly go to the previous match, the next match. There's a drop down list of all the matches. They stopped doing it in around 2013, right, Kostya? So they don't have all the Carlsen discography, so to speak. They've got his first.
Oh, I guess not.
Anand.
Yeah, I don't know.
So that feature is awesome, folks. Go click around in it, and maybe they'll update it with the last 3 or 4 matches. So that's awesome. And oh yeah, we also wanted to shout out our Patreon because we have a new feature where people on Patreon are voting for what the topic's going to be for Dojo Talks. And Kostya put up a topic, and I put up a topic, and Jesse put up a topic, and the patrons spoke, and they picked this, and it's going to keep us busy for couple weeks.
Yeah, let me just say special thanks to Patreon, because that's been around for years now, basically since the start of the dojo. And at first we were kind of doing some content like videos and game analysis for stuff. Then at one point we just switched over. We just said like the Patreon from now on is just going to be a way for people to support the dojo if you like the content that we're putting out on Twitch and YouTube. But if you don't necessarily want to get better at chess. If you want to get better at chess, then ChessDojo.club. Join the dojo training program. You get better at chess. You support us. That's where you go. But if you're not super interested in the training, you just want to support the dojo, then Patreon is the place for that. And now people can vote on topics, which I think is super cool. You can also suggest topics as well.
Yeah. So we're upgrading and revamping a little bit the Patreon, adding some tie-ins to the podcast and other free content that we put out on Twitch and YouTube. But thanks to everyone who supported us there all along. Before we had the training program, that was like the only thing keeping this project going, financially speaking. So now let's get into the matches. The first 2 matches we're going to talk about weren't official world championship matches, but we're going to talk about them anyway. The Bourdonnais McDonnell matches / match, a series of 6 matches played in a year, and then the Morphy versus Anderssen match. So we're going to include them. We could argue back and forth. Are they, aren't they, whatever. I don't think we're going to spend too much time on that. Instead, I think we'd just start by introducing each of us in a round what we really looked for and thinking that a match was great or not great. So I'll go first and then pass it to Kostya and Jesse. To me, what I was looking for in a match being great was the sort of story of it. First of all, like, just, is it an exciting story? When I think of it, am I thinking, oh, this new era was dawning, or this era was closing, or this revealed that you could play h4 on move 1 instead of playing in the center, and it, changed chess. So it's really the story And then also adjacent to the story, the legacy, right? Like, what did it mean for chess? How did it change chess, or what patterns did it set running in the chess world after that? And then my other criteria is the quality of the chess. And that, again, I'm going to judge compared to its age. So I'm not going to expect someone in 1850 to have the same computer accuracy as somebody in 2020. But relative to the era, relative to the level of the players, did they play, great games? Was there nice art game by game individually? So you could have a match where somebody wins 10-0 and it doesn't seem very exciting. But if the games appeal to me, then I could give it some points for artistic value. All right. And that's my spiel.
Cool. Okay. I'll go next. So for me, my main criteria for today, because we were going to be ranking matches originally, I was mainly thinking, number one, which of these matches have I heard of? Because I'm not the biggest history buff. And which of them do I actually know something about? Because those are probably the ones that are, for me, the most important, the most interesting and greatest matches of all time. The ones that have made the headlines, so to speak, and the ones that I kind of knew, because I know about a lot of matches, but there are some matches that I know about and I could literally not tell you a single thing about that match, like who was leading, who won. I can tell you who won, but who was favored, all that stuff. So yeah, that was kind of my main criteria, is did I hear about this match and did I hear something interesting about the match? But also doing a bit of research for the show, I feel okay, I learned a lot of interesting stuff. So for me, I think just the epicness of the match is important, the storylines, how interesting the match was. If it was a blowout, then yeah, it's not particularly interesting. And then of course the level of play and the level of battles. Some matches just seem absolutely epic, and then others just seem kind of slow and not that interesting to follow. So that was kind of my thinking for how we're gonna tier list. So I guess we're just gonna average our picks, and you guys definitely might convince me on stuff if you know a lot about a match and know some good deets on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing I should just say is how we're doing this, because it'll a little bit explain how I'm going to rank these matches. So we're going to do this in 3 parts. Originally, it was just going to be 1, and we were going to rank our top 5. And David was like, no, we got to go deep. And that's cool. So we're going to take 3 shows to do this. At the very end, we're going to each rank our top 5, and we'll get a dojo top 5 from that. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take 3 shows. And the first show is going to be what we're going to call the pre-FIDE matches. So this is before World War II. And then the second show will be post-World War II up until 1990, when the title gets split. And then the third show will be 1990 plus, right? Okay, so in particular for this show, what I think is amazing about these matches is they set the tone for everything that's to come. So if you think about other sports, individual sports, for example, most don't actually have an epic world championship. And one of the things that's special about chess is that we do have something like a world championship. And you have to ask yourself, well, what is this world championship and why is it a thing? Why is it so popular? And so when I think about the matches that we're going to talk about today, I'm really interested in ones that were so epic that they appealed to the imagination both then and now, of a struggle that was so intense that it informed people about what chess was, right? Other sports, they just don't have this quality of this epic world championship the way that chess does. And so we'll talk more about what that might be in these matches. And then I think that totally informs what comes later. And when we even talk about later, we will have other podcasts like, what should the World Championship cycle be like? What kind of thing should it look like? It's all informed, for me at least, from these early matches, because they're setting the tone of what's epic and cool about it. The only reason we continue to have a World Championship is because these people created something amazing in this first period pre-World War, pre-World War II. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me just add to that. This pre-FIDE era is very interesting because it was before FIDE, so there was no organizing body.
Right.
It was just kind of like the Wild West of chess, and a lot of matches didn't happen. Some matches only happened because there was funding found for them, and so that just makes for a ton of very, very interesting stories. Part of what makes the World Championship legacy for me so interesting is that it's so dirty and messy. Like it's never been a clean cycle, basically ever in any era. And there's always been players that were like scuffed and left out, and that's unfortunate, but it's just kind of part of the chess history, which in a way is beautiful.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
All right. So we'll get right in. We're going to talk about Bourdonnais versus McDonnell. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to rank it as one match, even though it was a series of 6 matches. This thing is not an official World Championship match. Bourdonnais was considered probably the best player in the world after this match. But, you know, they didn't have ELO rankings, and they didn't have a World Championship organization like FIDE, et cetera. They didn't have a qualification system. They're just, this guy in this coffee house seems to be good. And, you know, they played a match, and what this match kicks off with right away is that it's epic, right? I mean, they play something like 85 games, I think, over the course of that year.
And how did they decide to, like, Bourdonnais was French, I assume. McDonnell was like Irish. How did they decide to play each other? Like, do you guys know?
No.
It's just clear these are the 2 best in the world, and
I don't even know, but there was like a
set on a match.
Who was watching over it. Do you know, Jesse, how they picked each other?
A little bit, you know. So first of all, they were both pretty poor, and we're going to talk a lot. Actually, when we talk about chess players in this whole period, we're going to talk a lot about poverty. And Bourdonnais was this very talkative, garrulous dude, and he's running around doing cards, you know, kind of playing quickly, but a conservative player at heart. So like kind of, you know, the way Anand later played, just boom, boom, boom. He was able to play quickly. No clocks though. And so back in the day, this dude, McDonnell, could be a real jerk, and they'd just sit there for 2 hours, dude. Can you imagine sitting there for 2 hours waiting for this guy to move?
Yeah.
You know? So let me just say about the match, it's really important. It's like they didn't conceive of it as a world championship. There might have been a little bit of like the French and the English are the best. And even though he's not English, he's playing in London, right? But those two traditions are the best. And so let's have this battle. And so a lot of things, when we say world, we're really talking about Europe. So Morphy comes in later, but Morphy goes to Europe, right? And then later, the only other world championships we're going to discuss, it's like Steinitz and Lasker, and they're going to the US, but they're definitely, you know, from Europe. So it's not quite yet fully a world championship, but this match is going to define the world championship. And then it's very important for me, and I'm ready to, I have to say, you know, other people don't see this as the first world championship. It's not the first official world championship. And they didn't even really think of it that way. But it's very important for me to think of it that way because this match was so epic. McDonnell basically dies, dude. He dies because of this match. He ends up having like a liver problem called Blight's disease. And for example, we're talking about modern day. These people are playing to the death, and it's a beautiful struggle. And it's one of the reasons I think the public fascination is so strong with these matches is because this first one was to the death. And so when other people are like, oh, Magnus, I'm worried, you're going to hurt yourself, stop playing. Just no, if you want to be world champion, you got to go the distance. It's like other sports too. You're subjecting yourself to a little bit of risk anytime you're playing at the top. And that's what these dudes did at the beginning, which set the tone for these later matches. So I'll be the first person, and I'm going to put this bad boy as epic.
Yeah.
So it took one match for Jesse to mention Magnus. I
mean,
curious. I'm going epic too. Yeah, definitely epic. You know, it's like 6 matches. One of the players dies. I mean, that's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, we're including it because it's so epic, and even though it's not an official world championship match, but we're including it in this list. So
yeah, I think we're all agreed it's not a world championship match, and yet it's so amazing that we're going to rank it as one of the greatest world championship matches ever. No question that it's epic. Even before we had embraced doing this topic and I was researching for it, I had been thinking a few days ago about like how in the past world championship matches were so intense that people were either like dying or going crazy, right? We'll talk about another match where somebody gets committed to a psych ward within 4 weeks of the match ending, right? And then I was wondering, like, and we did our episode about, you know, madness and world championship level play, right? And I'm thinking, like, how is Magnus like trying to have like a balanced life? You know, like when did it happen that you could try to be the best chess player in the world and also have a life, you know, have a family, have a boyfriend or girlfriend, like have other interests, like learn another language, go on vacation. Like, where does that come from? At some point, it was either you give everything you have to this thing to the death, or you're not going to be in the top 2 or 3, buddy, right? Like somebody else who's willing to do that will be.
Yeah.
And now we've got these chess players who are like quasi-normal. Weird. But these two guys, no, they fought to the death, and you know, they were so desperately poor that it's also financially a fight to the death. You know, for these prize funds. Bourdonnais died 5 years later, penniless. The best player in the world, you know, world champion if there had been one, right? Dies penniless 5 years later. And one last detail about this match before we move on. The guy gets buried in the cemetery right by his rival McDonnell. Somebody else had to pay for the burial, right? Like he was just dead in the streets, right? But some wealthy guy placed him there. And so, yeah, they fought to the death, and then they're still lying there together. Epic.
Yeah. Actually, I also like one thing. David said we agree this is not a world championship match. I don't agree with that. I disagree. Okay.
Sorry.
I think I want to say with this one, like, I think it's very appropriate historically to say this was the actual first one. And I feel historians, I don't know, 50-50. It's a little bit semantic too. But it definitely, because it sets the tone for what comes later, to me, that's why it's the first world championship match.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe with more historical knowledge, I could fill in some of these gaps. But to me, like, I don't know what the rules were, like the terms, why a match ended at a certain point and then another started. You know, the first one was so much longer than the others.
Yeah.
One cool thing is sometimes people have held against the match that it was a bit of a blowout in Bourdonnais' favor. But actually, if you discount the first match, it's extremely close.
Right.
And I think like McDonnell learned from that first match where he got bludgeoned by like 11 games. And then over the next, 60 games and 5 matches, he was winning 2 out of 5 of those matches, and overall minus 7 games over, dozens and dozens and dozens of games. So I think actually it was a very, very well fought, closely contested, and dramatic match.
Right.
Nice. All right, last thing, and then we'll move on because we do have 18 matches, I counted, to go through. Last thing, I think one of the things that's so famous about this match is that it produced one of the most famous final positions of all time, which we have to mention. You guys, of course, know, like the position, I think McDonnell Bourdonnais, I forget which match, maybe match number 4, but it just ends in this just immortal position, immortal game with like 3 black pawns on the second rank. And it's just this beautiful back rank checkmate about to happen. Just absolute brilliancy, absolute immortal game.
The matches had some blunders, but also already some brilliancies. So very nice. That's a great game.
Okay. So we all said epic. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go on. Number 2.
Morphy Anderssen,
1858. Also not an officially sanctioned world championship match, but we're including it because Morphy was considered unofficial champion. Anderssen was definitely considered either the best player before Morphy or one of the best players during Morphy. Yeah. So I think it's fair. I think it's fair to include it. I think it's fair.
And in my opinion, outside of Morphy, he was the best.
And I want to add one of the reasons to consider it this way is Steinitz and the other guys that we're going to talk about later weren't willing to even consider a world championship until basically Morphy was dead. So we're going to get a huge gap between this one and the next one. And it's because, well, for one thing, Morphy slaughters Anderssen. And Anderssen was no chump. And Anderssen later is playing Steinitz and Zukertort and these other guys, and he's pretty much body slamming them. So at least in their early years of the Steinitz, him versus Steinitz and Zukertort. And he was body slamming everybody of his generation. So Morphy goes over there and destroys him. So it's like, oh, this is what it means to be world champion. Again, informing later times is like when you just destroy and you don't even have anybody that's kind of even close to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I would say the whole institution of the world championship owes a ton to Wilhelm Steinitz, who sort of originated the word and the title and so many aspects of it, and is in theory the first official world champion. And he was clearly, deferring to Morphy for not just many years, for decades, while Steinitz was probably the best player in the world, right? For probably like 2 decades, pretty much he deferred and waited. So yeah, let's rank this match.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would vote great. There's something fundamental and exciting about these early matches, and the quality of Morphy's play was fantastic. I wouldn't put it in the top tier personally because of it being sort of a blowout and not very long. I think it's 11 games long, something like 7 wins for Morphy, 2 for Anderssen, and 2 draws. And so to me, it doesn't have that full epicness. It's pretty clear who wins.
Yeah, I would say great. I would say just the fact that we got this match is fantastic. It's like Morphy versus Anderssen, number 1 versus number 2. There's like clear winner. I remember playing through some of the games. I don't remember them super well, but I remember really being impressed with Morphy's play. I thought he played really well. So I thought the quality was good, and fantastic opponent. So I would say great.
Okay.
Not epic, but great.
You guys are obviously overruling me here. I would have put it as a good just because Anderssen is not at his best in this match. I think Anderssen was like, who is this chump coming over here? I'm not even taking it seriously. So it's still a good match, but to me it'd be just on the B category. But if you guys both want to put it in the A, I guess I'm overruled. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I slightly don't buy into these who is this chump kind of narrative.
Yeah.
Because you're playing a match against someone, and after they've beaten you a certain number of games, you should notice that that there's somebody, and pull out whatever best level you were holding back. If you're dueling with your left hand because they don't know you're right-handed or something. I mean, at some point you should switch when they're bodying you.
Okay, good.
Alrighty. Next up, we have, I think, Steinitz Zukertort, 1886, the first official world championship match.
Yeah.
I'll go first on this one just because I don't know much about it. I know that Steinitz came back. It was like a big comeback. And I remember playing through some of the games. I like the games, but I didn't have a ton of memory about this match in particular. So I would actually give it great just because I know there was this fantastic comeback. And I do remember liking the games.
Okay, time out. This match is definitely epic. I'm going to move it up there. You guys can overrule me and bring it down. But let me just give you my spiel of why this is an epic match. So first of all, this is the first match where we get an official title of world champion. And something that's very important to understand is in the lead up to this match, there is so much trash talk, dude. There is so much trash talk into this match. And there's a great book that I reviewed for the site called The Ink War, talking about all of the trash talking that was going on. Steinitz is a miserable human being, dude. Just a terrible, terrible dude. He has no social skills, and he's just wailing on these, somebody writes an opening book, and he's like, this is dumb. You guys don't even have the right to talk about chess. Really crude stuff. And this is also kind of the period where Steinitz has moved from being in the school of Anderssen, where he kind of learned his chops, to now more of a positional player, and the people hate it, dude. They despise it, and he's kind of developing a positional school which then Lasker kind of champions as being this big positional school. And I want to say the guy who wrote the Ink War is like, no, this is not true. Zukertort was actually the champion. There's people arguing about this Steinitz school and what it means. The further thing that we got to say about this amazing match is that basically it kills Zukertort, dude. This is another battle to the death. And from my book, you got to go epic when you get somebody dying. And Steinitz also never really the same after this match. He's going to keep playing, but he's also damaged. But Zukertort definitely damaged. And then after, actually, we're going to talk about Ding in the next couple weeks. And Ding is somehow damaged. How it happened, I don't know. But Zukertort, he kept on living, but his chess went way down and his health went way down. And it's this great match, by the way, where they go New York, St. Louis, and then New Orleans. New Orleans is this cool last stop because then they're paying homage to Morphy by going down there, right. You know?
Yeah.
And in each of these things, drama is going on. A great match. And there's some great games too. Oh my God, some great positional games going on.
People worry about reserving venues now. They had a rule that they had to play in New York until somebody won 4 games and then they would move.
Right.
To the next venue. You see what I mean? So it was like, and then they had to win 3 games before they moved to New Orleans, right? So there's no idea what the schedule is, right?
Yeah.
Really cool. To me, this is number 1 versus number 2. It's the first world championship match ever. There's good chess content. There's even a comeback. Nowadays, you might see a score of 10-5 and think like, oh, that's a blowout. No. For those days, it's not a blowout, right? Because they're capable of winning 4 or 5 games in a row, and that happens a couple times. So Zukertort wins games 2 through 5, I think. You have 4 games in a row. You could win with white, you could win with black, game after game. So you can get bigger scores in these matches without necessarily calling it a blowout. By the end, it seems Steinitz is winning the match, sure, but I think it's a very interesting match with that comeback, and for sure, another epic. So there it goes, a foundational match.
One thing actually I also want to add about this. It's very difficult to write chess books that aren't really about the moves, right? That are just about the stories and what's going on. So I'm very thankful for like this book, The Ink War. And I just want to point out there's a real dearth of literature for a lot of the matches that we're about to cover. Right? We know like what are the details of all these negotiations that are going to go on. For example, we have very little knowledge. And what are the details of the people involved? Very little knowledge. Whereas that one, like dude went in and did a bunch of research, historical documents, and that's really what's necessary for a lot of the period that we're about to go into because we don't have that much. All right, let's keep going.
Steinitz Chigorin, 1889. Jesse, you said that in the last one that's in your last comment that Steinitz was kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
With no social skills.
Yeah.
But even though this was kind of a phase of like gentlemanly this or that, where they would address each other as Mr. So-and-so when they talk to each other, even people who knew each other for years here in this chess world, there was a kind of brutality on all sides. I think these people had like huge egos and they really thought they were better than each other. They didn't have a rating list to help prove it. So they were really like out for blood. And there's nastiness on all sides.
Right.
Not just Steinitz's side.
Yeah.
And I want to give him a lot of credit for everything he did to establish the world championship, actually, because look at him defending his title, right? He wins the title in 1886. He defends it in 1889, 1890, 1892, 1894, right? And look at his choice of opponents. Chigorin was like somebody who, some people said like, oh, you're playing Zukertort, Chigorin's number 2, right? Well, yeah, he plays Chigorin, right? Then there were these people complaining like, oh no, Gunsberg is number 2, Chigorin's only number 3. So he plays Gunsberg, like he played literally every single match opponent you're going to see for him, and he's playing them every 2 years, if not more frequently, is somebody in the top 2 to 3 players in the world. He just took on every proper challenge.
And I want to add something to what you just said, David. So one of the things that comes out of looking at these people in the 1800s, they're poor. And we've talked a lot about on this show, on the podcast, about how when me and David were coming up before the computer, chess masters were kind of seen as gods. They were demigods, right? They were held in a high esteem. And if they said something, and you were lower rated, you didn't really have the right to say anything back. And now you'd see some kid and be like, well, I turned on the computer and the computer said you were wrong. No, that's not the way it was. So one of the things that's going on with the title for Steinitz is to establish this whole thing of establishing hierarchy, right? So who is the best in the world? And having that title is a huge deal. It's one of the reasons you say he played a bunch, but that's at the end of his life. Earlier than that, before the Zukertort match, he was saying he was the best and continued saying he was the best without playing a match. So it's this whole thing about establishing hierarchy that's very interesting that I think is important to think about, because you have to think about a world without ratings. Right. Mm-hmm. And so in this world without ratings, there's going to be a lot of people saying, oh, I don't like the way he plays it. Like, for example, they were saying that about Steinitz. They're like, oh, he plays this positional garbage, blah, blah, blah. I hate him. Mm-hmm. But then without the ratings, you're going to need something like a title, right? Or a claim, or else you don't have anything to stand on in this, huge melee of a public debate.
Right. Yeah, it was a lot of drama. It's so fascinating that you had to win the court of public opinion, basically, to get your shot.
That your chess idea was superior or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Steinitz Chigorin, great match. I'll put it as good. I'll put that as a good match. I don't know how you guys feel.
So for me, I really like this match. I would give it great. I don't know a ton about the match, but I just, I know a little bit about Steinitz and Chigorin, and they had a big rivalry. They had a very big dispute in the Evans Gambit, where Chigorin thought Evans Gambit is good. Steinitz thought it's not good, and he can just take the pawn and put his knight on d8 and just be okay. And they just had many games featuring. But I just noticed one thing about this 1889 match that I didn't know. Going through the Chess Games overview of it. Shout out to Chess Games once again. 17 games in this match, 16 decisive.
Yep.
So that's pretty remarkable for me. And a number of good games as well. I'm sure there's blunders too. But yeah, I would give it great.
Okay.
Yeah. So would I. And I think also, Kostya, that is the lowest draw percentage in any world championship match ever. It's just incredible, that degree of blood. And I think that is one of the great things about chess also, is just sort of the clash of ideas. So for them to throw down again and again, believing in their, concept of values on the chessboard is great. Great match.
Yeah, I just love that every other game was Evans Gambit. They just kept going there.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. Because there's no engines to tell them oh no, it's actually 0.3 here, so you can't do this.
Yeah. There wasn't even anybody who could publish analysis that you could say oh, okay, I believe that. They just fundamentally didn't evaluate positions the same at that point.
Yeah. Already. Okay, so that one's going into great. So we got 2 epic so far, 2 great.
Yeah. Kostya, you mentioned earlier on that there were matches you didn't know anything about, but at least you knew if the match happened, and maybe you could and you could tell who won. And I have to confess that in my research, there was a match that I discovered that I didn't know happened. And that is this next one, Steinitz versus Gunsberg. I did not even know that match had happened. I can guess who won it if somebody tells me the match happened, but I didn't even remember that these guys played. But it was a well-chosen opponent. I mean, Gunsberg was the other person who might have been number 2 around this time, other than Chigorin, and he just played Chigorin, and then he played Gunsberg, and then he plays Chigorin again right after. So I don't know too much about this one, but I would guess that it's at least a good match. I mean, he's playing against, the best possible competition. It's reasonably close, 6 games to 4.
Honestly, I'd say uninspiring because I mean, both you guys didn't know about the match. I like vaguely heard, like when I saw it in the list, it like rung a bell. Like so, I'd seen the name Gunsberg before. I like kind of knew they played a match, but yeah, I couldn't tell you like anything about it or like any games. With all due respect, apparently Gunsberg defeated Henry Bird and then Blackburn in matches in the late 80s. So those were very, very good players. So he clearly established himself as a elite player, but you know, the match didn't stand the test of time. Let's put it that way.
That's right. Okay.
Okay. By the way, these shows are a great way for us to learn about stuff because the best way to learn about something is to make bold claims on this podcast and then go to the YouTube comments later.
Right. Someone's going to paste for you 3 classic games they played and be like, come on, Kostya, have you no chess class? Well, none of us.
Which I totally appreciate because sometimes we just say something offhand. Like we just say like, oh, like Bronstein never blah, blah, blah. And then someone will like write like a very nice like paragraph. Actually, Bronstein, the reason he did this was because like so-and-so. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate every time that happens.
Yeah. Same. Good one. Okay.
So to introduce this next match, I'll say, I think if this were a Russian podcast, they would putting this Steinitz-Chigorin match higher because for the Russians, Chigorin was this foundational figure. And the same way we talked, let's say top US players, right? Like, for example, for us, Fabi is really high simply because he played in the World Championship match. So it's a big deal for Russians and Russian people, especially of that time, but also of this time, thinking back of Chigorin as this foundational figure. And Russian chess at this time is really exploding. It's really cool when you read Tarrasch in 300 Chess Games. He talks about going to Russia and they're just totally in love with chess, people obsessed, you know. So I thought it was similar to me of Steinitz Chigorin 1889, but I do want to stress that depending on if you were a Russian player, this match would be way up there. Both of them, you know, would be way up there. And both of them really could have gone either way. And I feel at this stage, too, we got to say Steinitz is no longer at the peak of his powers. The man is old. The man is old.
Yeah, 56, I would estimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say great match for me. And a couple fantastic games. Game 1 of this match, I think everyone should check out. Chigorin defeating Steinitz in Evans Gambit. So, you know, like classic, but also just like one of the greatest games, I think, in any World Championship match. And then Steinitz winning against Chigorin in round 4. This game is also very, very well known for Steinitz's combination. So I would definitely encourage folks to check that one out as well. So I would definitely say great for this match. Cause like, again, I like the battle. I like the matchup, and I'd like, there's like some very recognizable games from it too.
Maybe I could be swayed. I was thinking of calling it good. It's a rematch. It is closer than the first match, but Steinitz is getting old. And to me, it's historically a little bit less exciting because probably at this point, Lasker or maybe even Tarrasch would have been better than Steinitz and Chigorin. So like it would be cool now to get a rematch between Kasparov and Kramnik. I was thinking that would still be a really sick match. Imagine if they sat down and played a classical rematch, the one that Kasparov never got. That would be fun to watch. But, you know, anyway, I think the fact that they were probably not the 2 best players in the world anymore takes some of the luster off. So I'm leaning towards good.
Okay, let's put it good then.
So Jesse, you also had it at good?
Yep, that's right.
Wow. Okay. So next up we got Steinitz Lasker, 1894.
Yeah, and this is going to be the beginning of a whole spiel. David hates Lasker, dude. Oh, man. Thinks he was hogging the title, all this stuff, you know.
But make the case for it, because I've heard this, you know, like Lasker was world champion for like 26 years, but he would like duck people. But then looking at the list of matches, he has 7 world championship matches, right? He played a lot of good players, Marshall, Tarrasch, Schlechter, Janowski. Like, so
Yeah.
why does David hate Lasker?
Well, okay. I mean, hate Lasker's a little bit strong. I had a very simple sense of this narrative before, and now I have a slightly more complicated sense of it.
Nuance.
Because I read a lot about Lasker in the last 48 hours. But maybe we should start off with the match against Steinitz and get into rain on some of these rematches. So what I love about the Lasker, one of the things I love about the Lasker Steinitz matches is a little detail about Tarrasch, who's sitting in the wings, just insulting both of them. You know, this bitter guy on the side who's like, I'm better than both of these guys. Lasker wanted to play him a match in 1892 to kind of, because people used to do that, right? There wasn't like a method of selecting a challenger, right? So as you like won a tournament here or there, you would challenge someone around your level to a match and you kind of show your status in a match. And Tarrasch said, oh, I'm not going to play with you. Like, come back to me when you've, you know, even tried to win a top tier international tournament.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's sitting on the sidelines insulting these guys. Despite that, I think that Lasker was already the best player in the world when Tarrasch refused to play him in 1892, calling him an upstart. Certainly he was the best player in the world when he won this match against Steinitz. I give props to Steinitz again on his like choice of who he played by giving Lasker a match, even though Tarrasch was mad that it wasn't him. Yeah, I mean, even once they played the match, Tarrasch said, like, you only won this tournament. You only won the match because Steinitz is old. Like, you're not the world champion.
Yeah.
I think it's a great match. I would give it a great, with both Steinitz and Lasker being foundational characters. And to me, it was probably like number 1 versus number 3 in the world at that point, despite Steinitz being, 58 years old.
Yeah, and one, I think I'll also go with great, but for actually different reasons. So Steinitz creates like a positional school of chess. And I think the reason Lasker dominates for this period of time, whether he's ducking the title or not, ducking the challengers, is because he understands something in Steinitz's games, studies his games, and creates like a refined view of what Steinitz did, right? He took it and he then brought it to a new level. And that's his narrative of it as well. He openly says, Steinitz was the one who created this new way of thinking, and I'm just kind of like, elaborating on it. And Lasker really was a great positional player, and it's really surprising. Like now, if you look at it, you'd be like, why is this so special? No, you look at the contemporaries and he's just playing so much deeper chess. And so to me, it's this really interesting thing where he gets to confront his master, take his master down. And the controversy really is that Lasker's like, oh, Zukertort was a chump and Steinitz was this amazing dude. And he's the one who then puts Steinitz on the pedestal. And this is really interesting because what it does is it creates for the coming world champions this idolatry around the world champion as somebody who's deeper, who has a deep sense of ideas, is in communication with truth. And Lasker just like builds on that. And then this reign that Lasker then starts with this match very much defines like a world champion. And whether he's ducking his challengers or not, he's kind of like saying, I'm the boss. I'm the boss. And he was, dude. He was. So I'm going to put that as a great there.
Yeah, don't hate the player, hate the game. I would give this match as good. I think you guys both giving it great, so we can put in great. For me, like I personally just didn't know a lot about this match other than it's just, again, like 2 very central figures, Steinitz, Lasker, both world champions. I guess I did know that at the time. I remember reading that a lot of people considered Steinitz to be weaker because he was older. And so everyone was just gunning for that match. And a lot of people thought that they would win the match against Steinitz if they had been given the chance, like Tarrasch, like Pillsbury, maybe Janowski, like other guys as well. So Lasker ends up winning it. It seems like the rightful heir to the throne.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. For me, I couldn't tell you a lot of memorable games from the match. But still, okay, epic in terms of who was involved. Maybe less so for me for the chess, but yeah, there you go.
As far as I can tell, Kostya, a lot of that noise was just that these people were rude jerks themselves, because if you look at his record, like they're talking about him being old, right? But he has decisively beaten Chigorin twice and Gunsberg, and then is playing Lasker, right? So he's playing like a top 2 or 3 opponent every 2 years and winning the match. So like, and then everyone's talking about you're old and you're not that good. Anyone could beat you, but clearly nobody could till Lasker. So.
Yeah. I mean, it was 10-5. So, it was kind of, I feel like at this point, it's like Steinitz should be scoring more. To me, actually, it's a little bit resembling like the first Carlsen Anand match, just like a new generation. It's like Carlsen's time. He's got to take over. And yeah. Almost
okay,
a predetermined outcome.
Then we get the rematch. This is the one that pushes Steinitz over the edge. This one's a blowout, 10 versus 2. Age is more than just a number. He seems a lot older 2 years later than 2 years before. And within 4 weeks, he's in a psych ward after this match ends. By the way, all these matches in this phase are being played first player to 10 wins is kind of like the typical format that they're playing, right?
Right.
And not counting draws in a lot of these matches.
And this is also very important because later when we get into the Fischer years, that's what Fischer is going to be advocating for. And this is his historical backdrop for wanting that. So not counting draws, which means it's very hard for the organizers because then it could go on forever, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at this time, these guys were playing, between 1 and 5 draws out of 20 games. So it wasn't dragging on forever. Yeah. But I would say this rematch, honestly, is kind of uninspiring. It's kind of like Lasker just, I don't know, just beats the old guy. And
all right, I'm going to put it
kind of sad.
I'll go uninspiring then.
Yeah, same. Actually, I didn't even know there was a rematch.
It was a rematch, but there was no match.
Yeah. So it's 10-2. I'm looking at it now. Yeah, no, it was a bit sad, to be honest. We don't have a sad category, but
what was it? Katara said, "Trust me, Zuko, it won't be much of a rematch."
Something actually I want to say about both these guys. We talked about top American players. A different definition of that could call both of these guys American players. And I think what's important to say about both of them, well, first of all, Steinitz, he was hated so much for all the trash he was talking because he had moved to England. He was hated there. And nobody wanted the guy. So he reboots his own chess life as a Jew in America, which is at that time, even though it's not entirely Jew-friendly, more Jew-friendly than what he felt he was experiencing in Europe. And then kind of a similar thing is going to happen to Lasker. Lasker also leaves, dude, and becomes American. So it's just, I never think of them as American, but right here, we're really talking about two American players. And so we don't talk about Lasker and Steinitz being the birth of American chess, right? We talk about Morphy, and we just kind of skip over Lasker and Steinitz. But when we think about world championship, really at the beginning of this phase, we're talking about a European championship. And then it's like Morphy and then these dudes bring the world championship to the Americas, right? Yeah. And so I think as an American consciousness of our game, we have to be like, wait a second, this belongs on the storyline of American chess.
I wonder if anti-Semitism had something to do with the move towards America, which was less anti-Semitic and more tolerant.
That's well documented. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for both of them. Yeah.
Because I'm not the greatest historical expert, but I'm kind of feeling that Tarrasch was a bit more of a jerk than Steinitz or Lasker. And here's another thing that you reminded me of. Tarrasch said that Steinitz played Gunsberg because he just wanted to play with other Jews. He's just playing with his fellow Jews, avoiding the real chess players. Okay.
Jeez. So Tarrasch, okay, problematic, huh?
Well, but we also have to say, we're going to go through this huge period of Jewish dominance, and it's going to last a long time, So it is this whole thing. it's really interesting. I was at the U.S. Senior, and that's still, I'm playing Eastern European Jews there. And that was who I grew up playing. Now it's not. It's all Indian and the Chinese kids. But there was like a period of Jewish dominance that glows from like 1880 to 1990, like that. You go up to 2000 if you want, with Kramnik winning. That's it. Actually, those are my numbers, 1880 to 2000 of Jewish dominance.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so then after 1896, I was surprised to learn that there was not another match until 1907.
Right.
Yeah. So now we have to talk about Lasker and how he managed the world championship, right? So first of all, there's two 11-year gaps where he doesn't play a match. He plays a number of matches overall, right? But he's world champion for 27 years, I think it is, we were saying. But that includes two 11-year periods where he doesn't play a match.
22
right?
years. Okay.
This is the first one, two of them, right? So, okay. Now, on the one hand, I saw that there's some complications, like he offered some kind of a match to Capablanca around 1910, 1911. He was negotiating a match with Rubinstein around the same time as well, and both of those matches fell through. He was also negotiating a match with Geza Maroczy in 1906, which is around when Maroczy was probably in the top 2 to 3 players in the world, arguably like the best possible challenger that Lasker could have played at that time. So he negotiated around some of these matches. I think Maroczy and Rubinstein maybe couldn't come up with the money that Lasker wanted for the match. And Capablanca refused some kind of clause around the playing time. I think maybe I'll get this slightly wrong, and we'll get a really good clarification in the comments. But Lasker wanted something where like you play something like 12 moves in 2 hours. Then you've got a break for lunch. You've got a second playing session in the afternoon where you play another 12 moves in another 2 hours. And then you would like adjourn. It seems like only 24 moves in a day. It had to be more than that. But it was something like really like over multiple days per game. And it was very much like an old man kind of schedule. Do you know anything about this, Jesse?
I mean, all of these negotiations, but what are you drawing at? Like, yes, they were debating all the time control and all that stuff, but like,
Well, apparently Capablanca like balked at some terms that were largely around the playing schedule, even more than, the prize money or the, who retains the title. I think he wanted to retain the title unless he was beaten by a full 2 points, which you could say, that would be an example of like a ridiculous condition where he's trying to avoid the match by saying, I'm talking about the match, but here are conditions you would never accept.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's complicated because like 4 years later in 1914, he said he does accept Capablanca's conditions. Capablanca sort of published an open letter to the world about this is what world championship conditions should be, what sort of the rules should be governing it. And then in 1914, he says he agrees, but World War I happens. So that delays negotiations by another 4 years.
Right, with Rubinstein. Lasker never played Rubinstein in a match.
Right. Yeah. That was right around that same time. So on the one hand, I saw that the negotiations are maybe a little bit more complicated, and I could understand, wanting like a prize fund if you're going to play a world championship match. On the other hand, if you look at it, like he manages to play people like when they're maybe not at their best a couple times, right? So I feel like he uses like the negotiations potentially, and I don't know, but maybe to like delay and play somebody when they're a bit over the hill. So there's this match against Janowski, which is coming up in 1910. It's a couple rungs down the list, but I would say like Janowski's peak was also around like 1906, around the same time as Maroczy. He was one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world. Lasker plays a non-world championship match against him that's tied, and plays a world championship match against him 4 years later that he wins with a ludicrous score, something like 9.5, 1.5 with no losses, like 8 wins and 3 draws. Yeah, I don't know. Like if you look at his record, he's got these blowouts where it feels like he's picking his times or spots a little bit to play people not at their best. Tarrasch also. He was supposed to play a match with Tarrasch, and Tarrasch broke his ankle or something like that ice skating. This is like, in terms of hatred, maybe his ultimate enemy, Tarrasch. And Tarrasch is like, oh, can we postpone it for like a month? Because, I've got like a broken leg or ankle or something. And he's like, no, the terms we've agreed on like expire if the match isn't played when like the contract says. And then he makes him wait another 4 years or so. He was supposed to play Tarrasch, I think, in 1904. And so in 1904, Tarrasch was maybe number 2 or 3 in the world. But when he plays Tarrasch in 1908, he's number 5, and he's like dropped off because he wouldn't postpone it for a month and said he renegotiates for 4 years. So I'm not 100% condemning Lasker here, like in my original reading of his reign, but there's certainly room to wonder, like, how is it that he's always playing people, a few years later off their peak or this or that, like, to what extent was he negotiating because he thought these conditions were necessary and were good faith, and to what extent was he setting himself up for success?
Yeah. If I was going to say one person I feel like maybe could have been world champion in this period, it would be Tarrasch. The guy was amazing and had a dynamic style that I think would have been, but he gets a shot. He gets a shot, buddy. He does get a shot.
Yeah. But that's the thing, a few years before, he would have done perhaps better with his shot, right? Like, if they play 4 or 5 years earlier, because Tarrasch was maybe the number 2 player in the world like 10 years before this, right?
Right.
And
like already 1894, when Lasker is beating Steinitz, Tarrasch is already one of the best players then.
Yeah. So I know these players are playing matches at age 50 or so, and they're still maintaining their level to an older age than nowadays in terms of how the game was played. But, like, waiting years does have some effect. And when they play in 1908, Lasker's going to win 8-3 with some draws, right? You have to think that 5 or 10 years earlier would have been much closer.
Can I just say, we got to talk, this age thing's really interesting because obviously Steinitz was old. Lasker, dude, one of the greatest tournament wins ever, New York 1924. The guy's already ancient. He's already lost the title to Capablanca and he slays this massive field, you know? So it's like, save your tears, Marshall and Tarrasch.
Right. No, the guy was very good, but he could also have been very good and like stacking things in his favor, at the same time.
Yeah. All right, let's go through it. So Lasker Marshall, a spanking.
1907, Lasker Marshall, 11.5, 3.5 for Lasker.
I'll put it as uninspiring just because it's like it's not even in there, but like that's a show of dominance right there. Just dominance.
I'll disagree. I would give it great. Because this was one of the matches I knew about, at least slightly. What I liked about this match, I liked how much Lasker won by, because I thought Marshall was like a good opponent. What I didn't know is that, the reason Marshall got this match was because he won this Camber Springs tournament in 1904 ahead of Lasker by 1.5 points. And that was the first time Lasker didn't win a tournament that he was participating in, as far as I understand, in a while, in like 10 years or something. And Marshall, of course, is considered very, very good. And then actually, I've definitely seen a bunch of games from the match, because the way Lasker would beat Marshall, I thought it was just like Marshall would like try some like tactical stuff and Lasker would just like shut it down, or like he would go tactical against Marshall and then Marshall would have to like defend, and like that wasn't his thing. And so it's just like, it was a beatdown, but I thought it was a very instructive beatdown. Yeah.
We're going to have to figure out how to average this, because I was going to put this one as trash. Like a brutal beatdown, one-sided, no hope. Marshall doesn't win a single game. He's playing Marshall a few years too late. There's clearly better players for him to be playing in this year. Like already Rubinstein would have been a better opponent. Marazzi would have been a better opponent.
Whoa. Marshall was the man, dude. What are you talking about? The guy, yes, he got spanked, but that guy was amazing.
Okay. Well, my take is that he was not amazing. So
okay,
maybe I'm wrong.
So I think we're averaging to uninspiring.
Yeah, I just counted quickly. So if we count the 5th tier as 1 point, and the 4th tier as 2 points. And then I put it in the 2nd tier, so that's 4 points. So it's 7 points total. Divide by 3 is like 2.33. So like round down, that would be uninspiring.
And by the way, as the old guy here, this tier thing is some millennial stuff. So trash, I don't know any world championship I'd actually call trash. That's hard for me.
Okay, but if the tier exists, we have to use it for something.
All right.
We have
that's just for fun. Yeah, we can call whatever you want. Least interesting.
Yeah. By the way, we have a confirmation from chat of the crazy thing I told you about the timing for Lasker's match with Capablanca.
Yeah.
12 moves per hour per player, break every 2 hours, maximum total play time in a day, 4 hours. So in 4 hours in a day, they would get 24 moves played and adjourn to the next day.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That is an old man's schedule. I mean, I might want that now.
Yeah, nothing wrong with a little innovation. So, okay.
That's quite a schedule.
Then we got the infamous Lasker Tarrasch 1908, which we already discussed, is a bit of a shame because it happened so late.
Yeah. I mean, time out. So Lasker at this point's 39. Dude is 46. Cry me a river. Come on. What are we talking about? So maybe it should have been, for Tarrasch, it should have been a little earlier, but still. Both of them, by the way, Lasker is trying to do stuff in math, and that's one of the reasons he is not playing actively. Tarrasch, I think, is actually technically like a doctor and has a real job, even though he's traveling around. So, it's hard for them to go and do these things. And all of these matches, actually, what's really cool about them that we should talk about for this current World Championship cycle that we have here is they're all going to different places, many of them in 4 or 5 cities. This one, for example, in both Dusseldorf and Munich. And so maybe we should retake that. That's so cool. The fans, would come to these different places, get to see the players,
Yeah.
Actually, that kind of reminds me of the recent matches that Hans was running earlier this year, where he would go to different cities and like play the player in that city, like his little tour.
There was so much less money in chess back then, but now organizers say, oh, we can't keep a site reserved for like more than 12 rounds. We can't, find sites in more than one place. Oh, come on, guys. We can do much better with the sites.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to put this as good. And what I want to say is, first of all, it's a beatdown again. And this is also like 1908. This is the time when both Capablanca and Alekhine are kind of like looking at the world. So they're already on the scene, Capablanca especially. And so they're like, oh, this guy's just wasting people like Tarrasch. And now it's my turn. And then they don't get their turn. Yeah. Do you guys agree with that, with the B tier? Is that okay?
Yeah, I would say good, because it could have been better.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty big blowout.
Yeah.
8-3.
For me, it's a blowout, so it's hovering in sort of the bottom ranges of good.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I give it good just because for me, it completes my current like Tarrasch villain arc, where after like making fun of everybody, he finally gets his chance and gets beat down. At the opening ceremony, he like wouldn't talk to the dude except to say, "Mr. Lasker, I have only 3 words to say to you: check and mate." What a fool! Was he trying to be a Bond villain? That's lame. First of all, checkmate is 1 word. Just say it as 1 word, dude. Also, the sentence is like 3 times longer than the thing he has to say to the guy. Finally, he loses the match and blames it on the fact that there was rain. I mean, I assume they played indoors. Come on, dude. You get beat down like that after all these years, and then you just say like, oh, well, the weather was quite wet.
That explains the chess game's nickname for the first game of the match, which was the game of the day where Lasker beats Tarrasch in the first round, and they called it Schach und Matt.
Yeah.
That explains that. Also, shout out to round 4 of this match, Lasker winning against Tarrasch as black. To me, I remember learning from this game as a child, and I think it's like one of the best games of all time, definitely, or at least in a match. So that was a nice one. But yeah, I would say good. I think we're saying good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the next one is interesting because when we did, what was it, like they're like top players to never win the title. I think David really made a big case for Schlechter as being one of the main people. So I'm going to let you introduce this match, David, because he's your boy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, yeah, this is a pretty dramatic match. I think people remember it because of the last game and the story around the last game. But to introduce Schlechter first briefly, like Schlechter was probably, one of the top 2 to 3 players a couple years before the match. When they play the match, it's probably around number 5, reasonable-ish. But Schlechter was famous for having an 80+% draw rate in his normal tournament play. He basically couldn't win tournaments back then because people would run up the score and he would like win 1 or 2 games and draw 27 because they were playing long tournaments. So he gets this match, and in this match, he's to some extent unrecognizable, playing really, really riskily. They're like fighting all out brawls tactically. And the last game, Schlechter's actually ahead by a game in the last round. So he only needs a draw to win the match. And he plays kind of like a lunatic. And I played over the game today, and it's like an incredible game. But yeah, he plays kind of like a lunatic. So he manages to lose that game when he only needs a draw. And it's weird that the guy who was the first sort of draw master of chess history didn't make a draw when that was all he needed to be world champion. So he was very close.
But wait, I thought you were going to bring this up. I thought there was like a conspiracy theory.
There's a conspiracy theory.
There was like an agreement, like a secret agreement or like a verbal agreement that Schlechter had to win by 2. And that's why he went so crazy in this final game.
Yeah. And it's back and forth on that. People claim there's no record anywhere. So if there was such a thing, it was basically verbal. Like Lasker cornered him in a bathroom and made him like gentleman shake on it and not let anyone else know, because there's no historical record of the thing, right? When you look at the way he played, it's bizarre. And Lasker did try to put in you have to win by 2-point clauses in many of his matches. So I don't know. It's an open question.
Yeah, and we got to say too that this whole thing, we're going to get into it, where there's a whole tradition of the challenger has to win, like a tied match, no bueno, right? So that's a tradition that is going to start really rolling and become concrete, especially in the Botvinnik years, which we'll get to in the next episode.
Yeah. I personally put this match as great. I mean, it's super close. I could have maybe enjoyed it if they had even more games, if the match were longer.
Yeah.
But the chess content was pretty good. The play was at a pretty high level, as well as being, aggressive and fighting. And the drama from the last round is something that I think a lot of people have heard about. So.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
You guys are both going great.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. Dang. I would have. Okay. For me, it was uninspiring.
Okay.
Mainly because like a lot of draws. Lasker doesn't even win the match. He wins it under, I don't know, suspicious circumstances. It draws the match, retains the title. And then I guess Schlechter wasn't even maybe the best challenger at the time. So it was he barely beats not even the best challenger. So,
but the drama, Kostya, the drama, buddy.
And I didn't know about any of the games. So yeah. I don't know where that averages out to, but
okay, that brings it down to the good, the B tier.
Yeah, fair enough. Kostya may be right. I mean, it was maybe the shortest match in World Championship history at 10 games, right? I mean, I would have liked some more, as well as some more blood to be shed in terms of actual wins and losses on the board. So,
but I could be wrong. Okay, YouTube, you let me know.
Yeah, YouTube tell us.
Yeah.
And now we get a real bummer. This one here. I'm also going to start off by calling it trash. This is Lasker Janowski.
Okay, hold on. Let me get in there if you're going to be a downer. So I just want to say a little bit about Janowski. Janowski is a very interesting player because the guy was first of all, you got to know he was like a gambler. He was drinking, would be staying up all night. And I first kind of got turned on to Janowski in the Alekhine's New York 1924 book. And there he also collapses. So in this match, he's going to collapse. So the guy was prone to collapse. So you got to understand that, like, when he loses this match incredibly badly, you got to say, oh, that's Janowski for you. Because he was consistently either playing at a very high level or just completely blowing it. So, and we a little bit have that today. I feel like there's some players, like sometimes I feel like rapport can be that way. But back in the day before it's professionalized, like this is what would happen, you know? So I just want to say, even though it's a blowout, this guy Janowski is still very interesting. Pioneered, to my mind, like a certain kind of electric attacking style, very fluid and dynamic that, you know, is related to what's going to happen in the Alekhine. Let's call it the Alekhine Revolution. Mm-hmm. But I will also say it's not a great match. I'll put it as uninspiring.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Like he was somebody with some kind of a confidence issue, right? Like he sometimes thought he was the best and sometimes wondered if he was terrible, you know, depending on the last couple moves he'd played. It seems like he had I think his streakiness had partly to do with a sort of uncertain sense of self.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Originally, I would have said it's uninspiring, but I would be swayed by David here. So we can put it in the trash column because I just put it as uninspiring just because I didn't know a lot about it. I definitely didn't know that it was 8-0 in Lasker's favor with 3 draws.
I mean, let's put it this way: what was the worst world championship match of anyone we're going to discuss today? If you just had
today, I'm not sure of today. So
today.
Yeah, something has to go in the trash column.
No, it doesn't have to, but I'm just making an argument. Which of the matches we've discussed was the worst? This one.
I mean, Marshall, he was spanking all kinds of people. Most of these matches, besides the Schlechter, are him spanking people. That is what it looks like. Well,
this and Marshall are the 2 that I ranked as trash, and I think this one's worse than the Marshall match.
Okay, you guys can put it in trash.
Yeah, I'll definitely say it's worse than the Marshall match. But apparently Marshall also didn't even win a game, you know? Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Similar.
Yeah.
But at least he managed twice as many draws before getting wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that brings us to 1921. Also, I think important to, when we think about the World Championship, I think it's, to me, it broadens the chess world when Capablanca wins, right? So, like, yes, Morphy was there, somebody not in Europe, but, you know, that was kind of a weird occurrence. And now Capablanca's bringing it. That brings in Latin America in a big way. To this day, Cuba has an amazing chess tradition. So it's the founding of a tradition outside of Europe, and it really internationalizes the game.
Yeah, but real quick, Kostya, where did you rank that Janowski match? I'm sorry.
I was saying trash. We should put it in the trash.
Then we should drop it all the way down there.
All right, drop it down, bud. Yeah.
Okay. Back to
now, Lasker Capablanca, 1921.
And, you know, so it's 52 years old against 32. He's a little older, but I want to say you got to recognize 1924, Lasker wins the big New York tournament. So it's not like he's a complete chump over here, right? And so this match, like, Lasker doesn't even win a game, and everybody kind of sees as a foregone conclusion that Capablanca's going to win. But, you know, I don't know. I could have imagined it have gone the other way too.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's a great match. It's kind of like the fall of the king. You know, Lasker was around for a long time. I like all the matches that are like a transfer of world champions, obviously, because I think those are all kind of important. I would say it's a great match.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this for Lasker. I think he remains basically a top 3 player through 1925. Like, I don't think that New York 1924 was just some like insane aberration. I mean, it's an aberration in chess history that anyone that old could be that good, right? But in terms of Lasker's level, I don't think it's like so improbable that he could win a tournament at that point, right? I mean, he's amazing. It's him, Kappa, and Alekhine for, probably 10 years. They're the top three from like 1915, where there's not much data because of World War I, until 1925. But the result is a little bit of a foregone conclusion. It doesn't have like the super highest drama. Lasker himself does this weird move where before the match, he insists that Kappa be the world champion and he be the challenger, even though he spent like 10 years avoiding Kappa being the world champion. Kind of confusing. I almost want to only call it good myself because I don't have like a huge memory of the games from this match.
All right, we'll put it as good. I'm okay.
Yeah, actually, you're right. I'll downgrade it to good because, it wasn't that close. And so has to be closer to be a great match, I think. Unless it's, really satisfying beatdown.
Okay. All right, we're in range, folks. Alekhine's going to appear, and he's our last character for our last major character for today's episode.
Already.
Alekhine, 1927, 6-year gap. Took a while to negotiate this. It's going to take even longer to negotiate the rematch that Kappa will never get, despite chasing it for 10 years.
I'll say this was great. I read a fantastic story here on Chess Games that I'll share about the match. So apparently there was long negotiation. So Capablanca wins the title from Lasker in 1921 in April, I think. Then by September, he's already challenged for the world championship by Rubinstein, who's also a top player. And then Alekhine also challenges Capablanca for the world championship. So then someone suggests, like, hey, why don't Alekhine and Rubinstein just play like a candidates match? And then the winner will get the right to challenge Capablanca.
Genius,
right? And then Capablanca's like, that's cool. But also, like, I will respect, the results of the match if there's like a decisive winner. But otherwise, like, I'll play both players, like, if it's close. But then apparently in 1922, Alekhine tells Dutch newspapers that he can't play the match with Rubinstein because Rubinstein has been assigned to a mental asylum following like his latest tournament, which apparently just wasn't true. like I just made this stuff up. And then this match with Rubinstein never happens. And then Alekhine, he's like searching for funding. Rubinstein never gets the funding. Eventually Alekhine gets the funding for this Capablanca match. And they finally play 6 years later in 1927.
So are you saying he didn't want to risk losing a match to Rubinstein? Maybe that was it. Or for whatever reason, just felt like it wasn't worth it. But I just thought it was it basically is like a move from like Survivor. I've been watching some Survivor lately. My brother's got me hooked on it. And it was just like this like cutthroat move. Like, oh, Rubinstein can't play. He's in a mental hospital. Damn. Totally manipulating like the media. So just I guess back then it was harder to fact check somebody, but pretty bold.
but also, so Capablanca 1922 says you got to bring 10 grand to the table. So that's about 175 grand now. Those people are poor. Alekhine is only able to raise it now in 1927. So it takes him 5 years to find somebody to put this money up. So it's not just about like, oh, there's this challenger thing. No, you had to bring some cash, dude.
Yeah. Which is part of why I say it's complicated, how we want to judge Lasker, right? Because on the one hand, he's always playing people after their peak. But on the other hand, it is legitimate that there should be a prize fund, right? And the players had to somehow provide their own prize fund, and that could drag on. So,
and not only that, but then Alekhine turns the screw and says, oh, Capablanca, after I beat you, buddy, you have to bring the money to the table, you, buddy. And then Capablanca wasn't able to find that money. So that's another part of the story afterwards. This to me is a huge match in terms of, I was going to say this is a great match. It's long, it's brutal. And these guys have been eyeing each other for like 10, 15 years now. They're Kappa's 38, Alekhine's 35, So also, let me just say, like when you're older, dude, it's going to crush you, these kinds of long matches. And I just want to put a theory out there. I just want to put a theory I think it's really important to think about world champions. As we've seen, these are all old guys, right? And my take on this is that now, because there's so much material that a kid can glom onto and easily get quick experience, like is actual playing, and then study materials that they're able to get where Gukesh is now at 18, crushing the world. Back then, you needed a lot more time. You had to be hanging out in the coffee shop, playing a bunch of people, dude. You had the quality of the chess literature, not that strong. So it's going to take a while. It's going to be a different peak zone, right? It's not until we get tall that we get somebody really young. Anyways, I just wanted to put that out there as to why these guys are so old. Botvinnik himself is like, chess players peak around around 50. Give me a break, buddy. 50, I'll tell you, I'm over 50. I'm peaking, okay? Also, a huge clash of styles. I just want to say, Alekhine, for me, in terms of how do you play chess, a really important person in the history of how we play the game. We've talked a lot about his annotations to New York 1924. When you read that book, it's like, oh, this guy's thinking about the game in an entirely different lens. It's not Steinitz, dude. It's not Lasker. It's this very dynamic, tempo-driven, attack-driven kind of game. So even positions that I think you have to talk about in a positional way, he's like refusing to. He's like, no, I can only talk about this in a way that's to the death. And so great clash of styles here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put this in the great category.
Yeah, one of the things I always remembered about this match was that there was sort of a long string of draws in the Queen's Gambit, and that they had some like really dry symmetrical positions where no one could make any progress. But on the other hand, they have 9 decisive games, which is still like a good number of it's more blood being drawn than we sometimes remember for this. And that's partly because they've expanded the number of games, right? They've gone from these 20 game matches to 30 game matches. And I like that. More games, better. So I approve. I give them points for, upping it to 30 games. I like that. I like this format, even though I couldn't quite understand it. Something like you have to have like a win by 6, the first person to get 10 wins or a margin of 6 by this day. It was kind of complicated. I couldn't figure it out. I read over the rules repeatedly. But they're playing a 30 game match approximately. And I would go with Jesse and call it great.
All right,
we'll do great. I'll say, actually, I was thinking great at first. I would honestly put it at legendary for me, because a couple of things I didn't quite value as much. But okay, number one, again, you have it's not exactly like a clash of generations, but like Alekhine was like a bit younger and then opens up this new like era a bit. Also, apparently Alekhine hadn't defeated Capablanca before the match ever in a classical game.
Yeah.
And at the time, a lot of people thought Capablanca was the favorite. Whereas a lot of our other matches, we have like kind of like a foregone conclusion going into it. And it's like, all right, it's just time for the champion to retire finally. So here actually was a surprise that Alekhine ends up winning. And then 6-3 with like 25 draws. So very hotly contested. I mean, 25 draws is a lot of games. So it's clearly very, very close in the end.
Yeah, but nobody died. So I don't know how you can get epic after that.
It's close. It's on that border, I think, between great and epic. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you guys put it great anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. But yeah, I think for me, it's pretty epic.
Yeah. Cool. So then we've got 2 matches against Bogoljubov. Bogoljubov was 40 at the time of the first match in 1929. Alekhine was supposedly going to give Capablanca a rematch, according to the normal rules. And there's some talk back and forth about why that did or didn't happen. But he said he was just going ahead with the Bogoljubov match in the meantime and was still willing to play Kappa as well, which never happened. But Bogoljubov was probably like a number 4, number 5 player in the world around this time. behind Alekhine, Capablanca, and maybe Nimzovich. Or maybe Lasker if he decided to dust himself off for a day. Alekhine won by a score of 11-5, 9 draws, so a pretty big win for Alekhine. I personally am not inspired by the match, though you could certainly argue it's a good match. Will you?
Well, first of all, it's a beatdown, and it's the first of many. And yeah, I think that these next couple matches that we're looking at, it's just Alekhine's stronger, and his only weakness is himself at this point. Like, will he be drinking too much? Will he be taking care of himself? That's the only question. Otherwise, he's just too strong, dude. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'll put this as an uninspiring match for myself.
Okay.
Not a bad
Yeah,
match.
same. I couldn't really tell you much about it. And like, I knew of these matches, like, but I didn't even know there was a rematch. I didn't know there was 2 matches with Bogoljubov versus Alekhine. Of course, Bogoljubov is a very historic player, but yeah, I just haven't. These matches never made an impression on me. So
yeah.
By the way,
there's some art in some of the games, like Alekhine delivers on the chess front at times. Like, there are some games that one should look at and enjoy in the beatdown.
So one thing, just a note that I want to make about this, it's interesting to me, is that, so in our next podcast, we talk about post-World War II. We're going to talk a lot about Soviets. And both Alekhine and Bogoljubov they've been pushed out of their homeland because of the Russian Revolution. And they then become identified with Germany. I think Alekhine has this whole problematic thing about his time in Hitler Germany. But both of them are like, I can't go back, dude. I can't go back. It's not possible. So there's this whole interesting thing where Russian chess exists outside of Russia for this period from when Alekhine wins the world title, right? So it's this whole period of, 20 some years, well, really until the end of World War II. So where it's fascinating because it's going to go back. It's going to go back to Mother Russia, but for right now, it's existing in this sphere in Western Europe. And, here's another fun fact. Just we were talking about how these matches were run. This match, dude, was played in Wiesbaden, Heidelberg, Berlin, The Hague, Rotterdam, Amsterdam. How about that, dude? How about we get some matches like that? So this way, all the fans, they would pay a little money to go see these guys. Fantastic.
Yeah. Also, we think of these matches as beatdowns, but they were 30 games long.
Yeah.
So he's like, they're playing a lot of games, right? They're logging a lot of chess. We got to give them some credit for that.
Yeah, I would say, these matches, Alekhine versus Bogoljubov, Bogoljubov won some games. So they're not the same for me as the Lasker matches where his opponents didn't even win a game.
Yeah.
I think if you beat the world champion a couple times in a match, like, okay, you're a worthy opponent. Period.
Yeah, I think fair enough. Carlsen can't even win one game against Caruana in a match, and Bogoljubov could win a game against Alekhine. So
yeah, same thing.
There's that. Okay. We get to the rematch, and I don't know how you rate something that is less inspiring than the previous one that we ranked uninspiring. You guys will help me figure that out. This is 5 years later. He still hasn't played Kappa. He's playing Bogoljubov again. And I'll just let Alekhine comment on the match himself, okay? And I will add nothing, and then you guys can figure out how to rank it. This game, more than any other, proves how useless from the sporting point of view was the arrangement of this second match, and at the same time explains my indifferent play on a number of occasions.
Wow.
I guess it's going in the uninspiring category.
Yeah. So I would also put it uninspiring just because I hadn't really heard of it. I think like the trash matches are really reserved for actively bad. I could be convinced this is a trash match.
David, do you want to go trash on this one, buddy?
I don't know. All I'm saying is Alekhine was uninspired by it. He himself, like, he wins some game and he's like, oh, this guy's so bad.
There is
That's why
something
this match was
a bit
pointless.
disturbing though about giving a rematch to the loser when the first match like wasn't even close.
Yeah.
Not that like wasn't like a complete blowout, but it wasn't that close.
Right.
So
Right.
But
I mean, he says this match was pointless. I don't know. I guess maybe the point of it was the prize fund or something.
yeah, that was the point. Yeah. I mean, these people were poor, dude. These people needed some money.
Anyway, uninspiring, trash. I don't know.
Yeah, uninspiring. Okay, so now we're coming to an interesting thing where my narrative of this next match is that dude got a little overconfident, thought he could just be beating down people, and this Bogoljubov set him up for it. And so I think one of the problems with the World Championship throughout time is when you get somebody who wins the World Championship where you're like, oh, I don't know. We're having that problem right now. It's very hard for people to think about the World Championship being this great thing when you have Ding Liren, who's like I don't know what he's at, number 18 in the world or something like that. Now, 23. Jesus. So the only other name that kind of comes up for me in history of maybe somebody who wasn't quite at the top who won it was Max Euwe. Not a bad player, but I don't ever think of him as like, this guy is really among the elites. And Alekhine's drinking too much, dude, and loses this match. That's my narrative. I could be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, that's the narrative I grew up on, Jesse, as well. But I'm revisiting it a little bit. So
okay.
Let me give you a revisit. You don't have to be convinced or anything like that. First of all, they're playing 30 games, right? Mm-hmm. So if Alekhine is slightly off his game or something, they're playing 30 games. He's got time to notice and try and win the World Championship with everything he's got left, right? It's a one game match. It's not like, oh, by the time he went on a drunken binge for a week and found himself down 5 games. He's down 1 game, So I don't really believe the whole like overconfidence thing as being like a full explanation. Like at some point, the person has played well against you. You've been playing a match for 2 months with the guy. I mean, give it everything you've got. And if he beats you, well, yeah, I mean, he's got more than people realize. So I think that Max Euwe was better than people think. And even once he won the World Championship, better than what people gave him credit for, right? So to me, he actually played a great match. 9 wins against 8 wins for Alekhine with 13 draws. Super exciting chess. And Euwe probably was like the 3rd best player in the world at the time. He wasn't like number 20 or number 30 or anything like that, And the whole point of having a World Championship match is if the 3rd best player by FIDE ratings or whatever happens to be the 1st best player, then they're world champion. It's not like Kramnik couldn't be world champion just because Kasparov was still higher rated than him. So I think Euwe was a worthy winner, and it was quite a good match, much better than the Bogoljubov matches. I'm going to tentatively call it a great match and let you respond.
I'm going to put it as a good match, just because it was such a shocker to the chess world. And no, once Alekhine sobers up, he's going to win the next match crushingly. So no, Euwe was not Alekhine. No, they weren't on the level.
Hold on. I'm also giving this great. I'm giving both matches a great because I think it's an amazing story. Actually, I think it's one of the great chess stories of all time. Hold on, you have Alekhine, the champion. Yeah, he doesn't want to play Capablanca again. And he's already defeated Bogoljubov twice. So no one wants to see Alekhine Bogoljubov part 3. Right? He's kind of in a little conundrum, like Magnus was. When Magnus was saying like he only wants to play like Firouzja for the next World Championship. So then Alekhine says, you know what? I'll play this guy, Max Euwe. Why not? I'll play him for the, $5,000. And then, as you guys mentioned, he shows up. He's like been drinking. Euwe takes the match very seriously. Yeah. He studies Alekhine. He studies with Marazzi. Wins a very close match, ends up winning by 1 point. And it's just this kind of like incredible story of like this challenger, like the underdog. No one believes in Euwe. And then the rematch, it's also fascinating because then Alekhine has to come back and like prove himself again. And like that's such a classic story where he has to come back and like find himself and all this stuff, and then rightfully defeats Euwe and then and then takes the throne back. So I think great, both matches great. And the games, I mean, also like very, very interesting. I remember seeing like a number of wins from Euwe, from Alekhine. Like I thought the games were quite good.
Yeah, I mean, the chess content's relatively high. There's creative ideas. There's more wins and less draws than some of the other matches, but they're going blow for blow, each of them scoring quite a lot. As Kostya points out, it could make a great movie, compare some other stories, right? It's like right up there with like a Rocky plot line.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a huge upset. I don't think we have any huge upsets on our list even. So for me, that gives it a lot of credit.
You're right. Like, and upsets should exist. You know, if you've got 60 world championship matches, you should have 2 or 3 upsets somewhere in them, and those should be great matches. I guess, yeah, maybe, but I can think of 1 or 2 others maybe.
The other thing, actually, I want to put on this is that this is the last time we're going to get a world champion who's not chess full time, right? So Euwe is like a math teacher or something. You know, he's doing he's a math teacher. He has no business up there. In any case, it's a good story. I'm not saying it's a bad story. I would put them both in the good category, but if you guys want to put it, great, okay.
All right. Great takes it.
Great takes it, okay.
Great takes it. So we're giving Euwe the respect he deserves. Amnesiac 74 is going to have to revise his opinion of Americans after hearing us revise the standard narrative around Euwe just being lucky because Alekhine was drunk. I just don't buy it. 2 months of being drunk and like never noticing that the guy was good. Now, I just can't quite believe that anymore at my age now.
You've never even had a drink, buddy. You've never even had a drink. You don't know.
Had a drink. I've just never been drunk. And it's been 20 years plus.
That was because I made you have a sip of wine after you won the tournament and you spit it out in disgust. You're like, oh, God.
Gross. That's gross. Yeah. Yeah, you know, alcohol is the taste of something that's gone bad. Rotten.
Okay. That was fun, you guys.
So both Alekhine matches go, Alekhine Euwe going great. All right, awesome. Okay, right. Jesse, maybe you could recap the list for the listeners.
Great upset and comeback.
So in the epic list, epic tier, as the millennials like to say, we got Bourdonnais McDonnell, 1834, and then Steinitz Zukertort, 1886. Both people basically dying. Somebody dying at the end. Huh. Then in the great, we got Morphy Anderssen, 1858, establishing really the pedestal of what the world champion would then become to be seen. And then, of course, Steinitz Chigorin, the great Ink War. Check that book out. Establishing officially the world championship title. That's 1889. Then we got Lasker Steinitz, the passing of the guard, 1894. Lasker is then going to just booty slap the next couple people in line. But also in the great, I don't know, he's just going to spank them. There's just a whole thing of spankings going to go on. I mean,
dominance.
When you look at it, we got some Lasker spankings, and then we got later some Alekhine spankings.
Right. So then chess has like the amateur era, the Soviet era, and the spanking era.
That's right. And then also in the great tier, we have Alekhine Capablanca, 1927, or as Kostya would say, Alyoshin, or something like that. Alyoshin Capablanca, 1927. Alekhine Euwe, my cohort here, they like the underdog story over here with the Euwe. So they put that in there. But that was then Alekhine coming back, 1937, crushing the math teacher. You know, okay. Then in the good, we have Steinitz Chigorin, 2, and Lasker Tarrasch, 1908, Lasker Schlechter, 1910, Lasker Capablanca, 1921, Lasker Capablanca, 1921. If I was going to revise my opinion, maybe that one I might go up. Uninspiring. We got Steinitz Gunsberg, 1890, kind of a crush. Lasker Steinitz 2, 1896, kind of a crush. Lasker Marshall, 1907, disappointing. That could have been really a big point that was Marshall's big chance. Then we have Alekhine Bogoljubov, 1929, Alekhine Bogoljubov 2. People disrespecting Bogoljubov. The guy was pretty good. Also, he ends up playing, I think, later in a lot of these Soviet championships. Amazing player. And then, of course, Lasker, Janowski. Janowski, truly the drunk in the group. Could play amazing, could play terrible, got really spanked there in 1910.
Yeah.
So
the
next...
worst beatdown
So
we've seen.
the next pod that we're going to do, we are going to talk about the period after World War II. This could be called the Soviet period, if you like, and that's going to be going through to 1990 when Gary decides, hey, I don't want to have anything more to do with you, FIDE, and that will be its own different set of drama and rules and all that tradition. So the next period, the Soviet tradition, will be in the next one.
It's going to be huge. We got Botvinnik, we got Fischer, we have Kasparov. It's serious matches.
Yeah.
But this is a good start. I think we started something great here.
Yeah. Any regrets on doing every single match? Either of you?
No, definitely not. I learned so much. Actually, it's so inspiring going through some of these older games again. Love it.
Yeah.
Really fun. All right, folks, go out there and play over a couple of the games, right? Now that you've heard about the characters and what was at stake and who was drunk and who wasn't at the time of the match. Go check out a couple of these games and let us know in the comments which matches you enjoyed most, either for the drama or the chess content, etc. If you are on Patreon, go ahead and suggest some more topics for us for Dojo Talks. Obviously, we're going to stick with this one till we get to the present day, but we've got more pods coming. So if you've got a great idea for it, let us know.